Hi guys, my name's Seb, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. Now today I wanted to talk about something that I didn't expect to be talking about when I first saw this stuff kind of expanding. But then in regards to one particular instance of it, it made me consider it in a kind of broader way. And this is the whole issue around Steam and other places throwing out kind of censorship orders, I guess is the way to put it, to various developers. Some of games that have been out on Steam for a long ass time, about games that are very adult, very graphic, having elements of a sexual nature, and blah blah blah, and how they want them censored, and how they you know have to push one way or the other to keep those games on that platform, even if they're kind of old. Now, for some of them, that has now been removed, or at the very least retracted by Steam and Valve. But in regards to other games, it's caused kind of fallout. And the one of these games that stands out the most in this regard is the game Agony. Now, there are a few issues with Agony, anyway. The most prominent of which being seemingly due to either the changes that they needed to make just prior to launch, or because of just not being as thorough with their quality assurance and their game testing as they could be. Who knows? The game at launch has been quite buggy, broken for a lot of people, myself included. Every time I try to, as much as the game in terms of walking around, jumping around, doing puzzles, finding things, levels loading in, all the rest of it, it looks fine, it plays well, and all the rest of it. Every time I try and click on the skill upgrade screen, it causes the game to freeze, crash, and I need to reboot it and start again, and then it continues with the same problem. Now, with this game, they made a point of censoring and removing certain things from the game. Now, they put those removed elements into a video as deleted scenes that they then uploaded to YouTube. Now, the thing that stands out to me there is, after watching those elements that were removed, those deleted scenes, it's a case of going, none of these seem out of sorts for what's in the media, for what's in the content that's being presented. And the thing that stands out to me is that the game context matters. Now, this is where I feel a lot of the censorship and a lot of the arguments over freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff that's been going on lately runs into roadblocks. And that is because the one thing that is ignored in a lot of these places and a lot of these instances is the context of the matter. And so when it comes to this game that is a depiction, an interactive depiction of hell, the first thing that I have to compare it to are, especially in regards to its aesthetic, the way it looks and sounds and all the rest of it, the inspirations that it is very clearly drawn from are from kind of Renaissance and medieval depictions of hell. And I've got a few of those lined up that we'll take a look at in just a moment. But in regards to the game itself and where to go with it and how much it should be censored, one of the things that stands out to me is the elements that were taken out are, relatively speaking, quite tame, all things considered, compared to some of these works of art and some of these other things that they have drawn from to create this game. And I feel like, again, the context of it being this depiction of the worst should count towards something as far as the tackling of the game is concerned for things like censorship and rating. Now, I would say, does it deserve an 18 certificate? Absolutely. No one who is below the age of 18 or below adulthood should be playing this game, because it deals with very mature themes. It lays them on quite thick because, oh yes, this is supposed to be hell. Now, the thing though that stands out is that that's the entire point. It's supposed to be a gruesome, hellish environment that embodies and demonstrates all of the worst things about the world and the universe in which we live. And yet some things wouldn't be censored ordinarily elsewhere from other things, and yet here they have been, when it was in the original vision of the creators of the game that those things take place, be involved, be shown off. Now it's a case of no, not so much. And so as a result, let's just pop this across, get rid of my face, and jump to here. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. So we've got these Renaissance pictures of paintings of hell. And so for all of you guys who haven't played Agony, I'm in two minds about recording it for the channel, because of how I assume YouTube would react. But on top of that, it's a case of, at the moment, as said, it kind of crashes for me whenever I try to open up the skill screen, so I kind of want to patch first anyway. But anyway, we've got these artworks that have, if you've seen the game, if you've seen the images from the game, then you know it's fairly obvious that it's drawn from images like this: piles of bodies screaming and writhing, being eaten or shoved into like large creatures, being consumed over here, having their stomachs filled in the most violent ways possible, being molested up here, attached to wheels. We've got individuals who are just piling up corpses, cooking people and eating them. You know, we've got demonic creatures with its junk hanging out, and human-esque creatures that are still incredibly grotesque, beating and assaulting these individuals. You know, everyone is naked, everyone is on display, everyone is at their most vulnerable and weak. Moving on, what else have we got? We've got people being thrown into fires. We've got angels looking on, unable to do a damn thing. You know, the old and young being kind of beaten, bloodied, poked with pitchforks, and driven into the ground to fill holes. Again, people being eaten and dismembered and essentially tortured for the sake of it. Entire pits of people being eaten by demons, being cooked, being fed to each other. You know, you've got all of this time and time again. Large, strange creatures that make up parts of the environment. This one doesn't zoom in quite as far. Women being molested, men being cut open and their insides pulled out, women being torn in half. You know, these are all themes that have been drawn from for a long time. You know, others, you know, strange creatures hanging people from the roofs, people being driven into ovens, you know, all sorts of things. Strange creatures, again, people being cut open, people being dragged into water. And then, of course, some of the more infamous ones like this, by Hieronymus Bosch, where you've got, again, large, grotesque versions of a person making up the environment. People being led around by demons, killed in merciless fashions, eaten alive, being seemingly about to be anally penetrated by a... I can't tell if that's a... that might be a brand, actually. Hard to tell. But it's you've got all of these creatures, these grotesque monstrosities, here to torture these people non-stop. A person that's been literally tied into a harp or strung into a harp. A person with a flute stuck up their rear. You know, women being clutched at and molested again. You know, you've got all of this stuff in the artwork that has inspired the visuals within the game as a whole. And as a result, it's a case of the context of the game, where it is, what it is trying to depict, where it has been drawn from, where it is inspired, what it has been inspired by. It is essentially a story-driven version of one of these paintings, where we inhabit both a weak, meek human, as well as moving on to eventually inhabit the demons within the images, so that we get this broad appreciation of the different perspectives within the piece. Nowhere, I think, would censor or suggest that these old artworks that, especially in some of these cases, are very well known, very used in many places, both in terms of fiction, in terms of study, whatever. I don't think anyone would suggest that these need to be censored, because they are depictions to a point. Yeah, it was this is a depiction of hell, of the worst, through the kind of perceptions of the time, as well as through the kind of lens of the artist's own imagination. And so as a result, drawing from these and expanding them into an environment where we can examine the ins and outs of the interactions going on here, I feel like that's as important, as valuable as examining these pieces, these artworks. And I've said before that I personally feel, and that there is a decent amount of arguable evidence to support as well, that video games and games in general are kind of digital media, software-based kind of digital media, is art, at least in certain aspects, and especially games are art of a sort. And I feel like Agony in particular is one that stands out as being very much that way. And so the censorships, whether there's been a fair amount of discussion, a fair amount of upset around some of those aspects in regards to this particular game. But I feel like the censorships and things weren't necessary in the first place. I would very much, especially considering we've seen the deleted scenes so far as well, and there is still so much left in the game, I don't see the point in removing those parts. I feel like it is still very much the essence and core of the game and what it is trying to convey. And so it troubles me that where we already know that games get censored, especially when they're moving from like west to east and east to west, and Australia doesn't like anything and all that kind of thing. We know that games have things taken in and taken out just to satisfy legislators more than anything else. But the thing that sits in front of me with this particular game is that this is drawn from a set of kind of classical inspirations in various ways. It draws from the Bible. It draws from the various superstitions of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the early Renaissance. And as a result, this it's as much an interesting journey through appreciating the superstitions and the fears of certain people, rather than anything else, to me at any rate. And so it worries me that maybe at some point in the future we will see another game maybe like this that examines something showing off some of the worst parts of humanity, and in a way that is potentially constructive, or at the very least kind of expansive enough for people to consider what's there. So I'm not talking about games like, Postal or Hatred, where you just go nuts for the sake of going nuts. but in this instance, you know, you've got these drivers, you've got the parts of the story that you can see and learn, you've got the various aspects of the world that are all, in some instances, very literal interpretations of what you take from the Bible, what you take from images like the ones we just looked at, and how they can be expanded into an experience for us to examine our own kind of path through it. You know, as I believe, as far as I'm aware, there are 6-7 endings to the game, so there are choices to be made within that environment that allow us to examine ourselves, examine the environment, examine the superstitions behind what we're seeing. And I feel like that's important. I've said before that when a client comes to me as a coach and I sit down with them, I'm very much their ugly reflection in a lot of instances. And I feel like this game, if taken in context, even with the parts that were removed, are very much part and parcel. It's an ugly reflection of certain parts of where we've come from, where we are going, and it's one that I don't think has been done badly on a kind of general content side. Yes, the tech side of things definitely needs fixing, but in terms of the way that it's presented, the way that it looks, I feel like this should and could be a game that deserves analysis and looking into. I'd love to be able to use all the systems in it to level up and get going with my own game. But again, it worries me that at some point we might have a game that tries to be even more reflective, maybe a bit more blunt with the way that it's putting itself across, and just because potentially it involves themes around sex and violence and terrible things, it worries me that we might see the game censored. Like, one of the things that stands out to me is the games like the Cat Lady, for instance. It was also pretty graphic and grotesque in its presentation of various things. It did it in a way that was still quite grounded, and that was still something for us to examine in the aftermath of playing it. And I feel like Agony sits in the same kind of environment. It's just that Agony's a 3D game rather than the kind of odd 2D-esque kind of side-scrolling elements and environments within the Cat Lady and other similar games. But anyway, guys, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. You know, if any of you have a solution to my problem where I can't get, you know, I go jump into the skill level up screen and it breaks, then I'd love to hear them. But beyond that, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Are games art? Should the context matter? You know, if it was a Leisure Suit Larry game or something like that, then I'd be maybe a little more open depending on what was in the game. But here, a lot of it, it's not just there for the sake of it, it's there to a point, and the point is that the place that we are moving through within that environment, within that experience, within that game, is literally supposed to be the worst things that we could possibly see and imagine. Is it gratuitous? Yeah, in places it's supposed to be. But again, it's already got an 18 certificate. It shouldn't be further censored beyond that for no reason. But anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the video later. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, found it interesting, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you in the video later. Take care.